hope they can hear from. So I will be the chair of this session. I think that the best chair is the one that tends to disappear. So I will try to leave all the time possible to your presentations that are many and are interesting, and have also, I think, some points in common. So I think we can have, I would not say maybe a fil rouge that connects everything, but we have some touching points between the different presentation, like a train, with each part of the train that is touching with the other one. So I would suggest when Raffaella and Nicola asked me to work in this session, I of course read all your abstracts, and then I wrote a few lines, and I tried also to imagine, because, well, of course, only with the abstract that was not enough information, but I tried to make a sort of story between the different presentations. So if you want to see the order, you can see, if you go at page 39, in the order in which you are cited in the text I wrote, then that will be the order. I don't know if it will really work as a storytelling, but that's an attempt that I would like you to follow. And I also hope that making a line that goes, let's say, from the presentation of some examples, and then it moves to more to the perception of being in those spaces, and then we go on to the critical problems that can emerge in these, let's say, controlled spaces. So I think that we can build up a line, and I hope that this line will also help us in the question moment, so that we can maybe find more shared points between the presentations. So I would like to start with the presentation by Gianluca Piccolo, Luigi Emanuele Amabile, and Nino Silva. Okay, Nino Silva will present, so I won't spend any time introducing the single presentations, because we don't have time to do that. So I leave you the floor, and the microphone. Nicola and Raffaella asked me to be really strict with the schedule, so I will. You will hear first noise after 8 minutes, and then the second one after 10. Okay? No, we have 10 minutes, but I will do the first noise just to let you know.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. And I will try to speak about the Porta Nolana terminal station designed by Giulio De Luca in between 1972 and 1978. And Giulio De Luca was one of the most famous Neapolitan architects, and he was professor at the Faculty of Architecture in the University of Naples, and a designer of several architectural projects into the modern city. And the aim of this presentation is to try to demonstrate how the Porta Nolana terminal, apart from being a functional shell, works an urban device that organizes flow, engages with the historic city, and anticipates the role later played by the contemporary metro station in the city, such as Municipio Station and Garibaldi. At the entrance of the eastern part of Naples, the terminal marks the transition into the infrastructural landscape at the foot of Mount Vesuvius, which is a strong landmark and axis of expansion. And built in 1917, The terminal reflects a moment when the city was redefining itself through large-scale infrastructure and new housing districts. And the LUCA'S project translates that modernist ambition into a getaway that addresses the density of the historic city, while opening it to a broader metropolitan dimension. With an open design, the terminal could embody the idea of an urban threshold able to capture and direct the flow of the city, or in a thing that so many architects in the history calls space. Okay. Sorry. Did you hear me? Can you try to speak at home?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Wow. Amazing. Thank you. I was talking about of the terminal as a space in between, and in this case, in between a dense urban fabric and a new part of the city. And this approach was later taken up by Naples' contemporary station, confirming that the project role as a pioneer in a shaping subsequent metro infrastructure. And the terminal project arose from the need to redesign the eastern part of Naples' railway system. In fact, the Bayard station that you can see here was opened in 1839 as the main station of Italy railway system, and had already been replaced by the Circumvesuviana station that was built in 1955. The second station, however, was severely damaged by the bombings of the World War II and ultimately demolished, paving the way of the Porta Nolana terminal. And with this project, the LUCA has relocated the railway entrance, realigning it with the major urban axis and the grid of Corso Garibaldi. And this marked a shift from Bayard object building to a continued urban interface. So the great canopy connects the street, the platform, and all the services, open up the frontage, and expand the waiting area and transform the flow of people in a public space. So the station is no longer a boundary. Instead, it becomes a civic gateway. The canopy, which is made of reinforced concrete, is supported by 7 trapezoidal pillars with a minimal footbridge. The structure is not a mere formal gesture, and the roof was designed to work as a device for movement. And the ambition was to turn the entrance into an open-air urban interior, and an idea only in part that has been achieved. The line between the city and the infrastructure becomes blurred because the canopy works as a threshold, generating spaces for pause and transition. And the ground, set slightly lower, remains continuous from the street to the railway platforms. And in this way, the building is not just a roof over the tracks, but a space that organizes encounters, movement, and waiting. So the Porta Nolana terminal does more than just occupy the site. It gives a shared space back to the city. And the sequence of the street, threshold, and tracks becomes a civic experience. And the setback of the canopy from Corso Garibaldi, that is this one, is not an accident. It absorbs poses and movements, reinterpreting the street edge as a civic frontage and becomes porous. So is what Ignacy de Solá-Morales, a Spanish architect, calls intermediate space, a place where the limits between public and private blur, opening up possibilities for new forms of collective life. The canopy clarifies the street space and establishes a perceptual continuity that brings the city into the station. So the terminal is not conceived as a single thing within the city in this sense. The ground floor incorporates offices. The ground floor incorporates offices and that extend along the tower's body, together with all the services and connections. This, together with the streets that penetrates the building, design an hybrid space with an hybrid program that interweaves trains, pedestrian, buses, and the city in itself. And the goal for the LUCA was not to design a closed atrium, but rather an infrastructural field. And the grounds remain continuous throughout these spaces, which are connected by intersecting paths and all the levels. So the station generates shared space that go beyond the basic function of a railway station, bringing civic life back to the city's edge. And so the buildings act as a vectorial force, influencing all the urban life rather than being a self-referential object. 2 minutes, okay, thank you. So the canopy managed all the expansions and modulate the gradients between transient and pose. So the generated object is an infrastructure for public city. And this brings us back to the premise. The aim of this presentation is to show how this piece of public infrastructure can become a relational device for the cities, an approach that has directly or indirectly inspired of many Naples' last intervention. In fact, following the LUCA'S path or approach, more recent stations in Naples, such as Municipio and Garibaldi, also follow this trend. The Municipio station designed by Alvaro Siza and Souto de Mura and Garibaldi station designed by Dominique Perrault use large shelters, underground paths and walkways and open plazas. The Municipio station, in this case, anchors the link between the port and the historic center. Above the square is reshaped as a single surface. Below, paths wave through the archaeological remains and rise again to a shaft of life. Meanwhile, in Garibaldi station is conceived as a vast slab spanning the square and the central station with an underground network of crossing and connection, like the LUCA'S terminal. Both projects engage the city's main axis and as interface that mediates scales and rhythm of use. Okay, I go more faster. The structure of Garibaldi station acts like a body among the things in the city that directs people and makes the entrance recognizable. And when these three stations are compared, emerges a common thread. The infrastructural threshold as a space of negotiation between flows and permanence in the city. And in this light, Porta NOLANA stands out as a pioneering case, introducing the idea of infrastructure that is both inevitable and recognizable. However, the vision of a fully functional public square has only been partially realized by the LUCA due to a fragile context surrounding it. The civic force of the building has been compromised by decay or inconsistent management and contradictory result of patchwork upgrades. Notwithstanding, the station maintains its capacity to regulate this densely populated area, absorbing all the pressure of the city. And this could, I think that this could be an illustration of resilient design. Thank you.
Prova, test. Can you hear me better? Okay. Yes, thank you so much for the possibility to speak right after my colleague. So we can all see a red cloud connecting the two intervention, the two contribution. Thank you to the organizers for the possibility to discuss with you. And so my way to analyze the station, I have two case studies. The first one is the Piazza Municipio in Naples, and the other one is the Vichy-Montfermeil metro station in Paris. We will see it more in detail. So my approach, this analysis is part of my PhD research, in which I'm studying the construction sites, let's say complex infrastructural construction sites within historic cities, and also large-scale interventions. And the aim is to understand, specifically for this contribution, how the architectural design deals with the context, both in terms of urban connections, but also in terms of heritage and the different paradigms that are taken into account when dealing with also complex infrastructure. They need to be inserted in a much more also complex context. So as we can see here, it's not a comparison, but it's to adopt a way to analyze two different scales. One is more urban and one is more at a territorial level. And so starting from Piazza Municipio metro station, as my colleague was saying, it was designed by Alvaro Sis and Eduardo Soto de Mura. To be crystal clear, it's not finished completely, because there is all the part of the archaeological park that is still under construction. And honestly, we don't know when it will be finished, but for the architectural part, it's completed. And as my colleague was saying, in this case, the architectural design really was influenced by the archaeological evidences that were found during the process of construction. These are just two examples of the huge archaeological evidences that were found, comprising also the port of Neapolis, so really also ancient remains that, as we can see, really tailored the architectural design. So in this case, in my understanding, but also the scientific publication on this matter, perceive how the architects tried to tailor their design according to the new findings. So what I tried to do is to understand how the theoretical principios de progetto identified by Caesar through his theoretical production could be seen and analyzed in this case. So to try to stay in my 10 minutes, I will just show you some example within these 8 principles. So in one case, we have the fact that the architectural idea that is at the basis of the design really stays within the place, and it can be seen as the willingness to connect this ground, the Palazzo San Giacomo, to the port area. So this visual continue also within the Castel Sant'Elmo Hill. It's really part of their project, and also the fact to build underground and not adding elevations into the ground square. It's also a part of this way to integrate the new, respecting the context. So what I was trying to understand is how the new urban space is really shaped thanks to this new mezzanine level that redistribute the flows, the pedestrian flows, from the infrastructural station that was built following also before the architects were involved. The traces of the engineering infrastructure were already laid when the architects were involved within the project. And so they tried through the architecture to fit this infrastructure with the historical urban context. And we can see here how the heritage dimension, it's really part of the new project. So what they always stated is that the heritage in this case is not just something that you have to preserve, but also something that is really taken into account and really comes into play in the new project, in the 20th century project. So as we can see in the left image, they put the slab of the new ground floor of the square. Really, structurally, it's imposed on the viceroyal walls, but also this intersection, and it's really fitting with the conference, with the session topic. It's also something that arrived to characterize the new urban space designed, and we can see here. So I don't know why the text changed like this, okay? But we are talking about the Clichy-Montfermeil metro station in Paris, and I really wanted to thank the session for having allowed me to gain also a deeper understanding, talking with another colleague that will present after, about how also in this case the project is really rooted in a complex system, also that is not just at local level, but in this case it's really national level, let's say, of the Grand Paris Express project that wants to build new stations in order to enhance the flows from the suburban area of Paris toward Paris, and not having to pass from Paris to connect the different places. So about the project in this case is that they have to deal with two types of heritage dimension. In one case, we have the Aqueduct de la Douai, sorry for my pronunciation, that it was an historical aqueduct built under Napoleon III, and it's now toward a renovation in a project of a promenade regional that links toward Paris, but not arriving until Paris. But this linear path that we can see here in green, it's something that it's also taken into account to shape the new space. In this case, and the matter of the project, that I understood, thanks to my colleague, that it's more shaded than what it seems. In any case here, the architect in this station established different workshops with the communities in order to arrive to co-create, let's say, the perception of the architectural space, and especially to try to provide a sense of belonging for the people and the communities of the space, of the place, in order to shape, basing on their culture and then the fabrics of their traditional cultures, to arrive to a new definition of colors and patterns that can characterize that will characterize the project, which is ongoing. So it is not possible to assess it. And as we can see from this drawing at the project level, we can see how these colors and patterns are really integrated in the architectural shape, as we can see here, not just on the roof, but also inside in the quick. And what is also important to say is that the social, I need to close? 2 minutes? Okay. So as we can see in this section, it's also foreseeing the murales of a local artist, Jaya, which within, we can see here, you see in the upper left part, which it's a local artist that through art tried to address, to depict societal challenges like riots and to depict the essence of the communities of the space. What of the place? So what can I say? If within this complex discussion that also this conference wants to contribute in, so that the infrastructure should not be seen only as a mere transport mean, but also something that really shapes the places in which we live every day. Of course, urban and historical layerings and the heritage dimension should be also taken into account, as it's becoming much more awareness also in the design practice. Okay, this is just to say that it's within a broader PhD research I'm carrying about, in which I deal with also the construction site processes, so more understanding how the different stakeholders come into play and how then the final results is really something that is shaped from the process, in which we don't have then, when it's concluded, we don't have a trace of it. So I will deal to try to understand how some, for example, software like BM could be a way to continue to keep the information of the design practice also when the construction is complete. Thank you.
So I invite here Filippo Prevedello, architect from Iuav. And we stay, I think, at least, correct me if I'm wrong, in the field of architecture, but in this case we add a dichotomy between, let's say, a building that solves a technical issue and also a building that is able to embody design and spatial opportunities, as you also have seen in some of the previous cases, so all previous cases, I would say. So there are good connections.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. So I'm Filippo Prevedello, recently graduated from Università Iuav in Venice. And in this presentation, I will talk about, for example, of car parks. The aim is to describe the importance that they have in the evolution of that typology, and also to highlight some intrinsic characteristics that make this type of building suited to accommodate change. So the first car park that I want to talk about is this project made by a Russian architect called Konstantin Melnikov. So Konstantin Melnikov was in Paris for the international exhibition in 1925, and he decided to propose these car parks to the city of Paris. In Paris, there was other historical example of car parks. The first one was built by Auguste Perret in 1906, but the model that the architect took for the inspiration was a warehouse. Instead, for Melnikov, the most important point is to change the base point, and he put for the foundation of the design the flow of the cars. And another important point is that for Melnikov, this wasn't a one-off project, so he didn't do simply an artistic project, but you wanna produce a new model that could be replicated in other parts of the city, and to create an infrastructure. So not a single building, but a series of buildings that could be placed in other part of the city. For the next two examples, we move in the US in a completely different social and cultural context. These two projects was made in the end of the 50s and in the beginning of the 60s. So in a completely different economical period. In fact, cars were a good that everybody could buy. And the problem to organize and resolve the traffic flows of cars inside the city became an urgent problem to resolve. For this reason, the city of Philadelphia called LUCA'S to try to improve the problem of the cars, the traffic inside the city. And LUCA'S in 1952 proposed this garage. Is a simple volume, a cylindrical volume. And you can see in this inner part, we can find the area where the car could park. Instead, in the outside, in this ring, that it's 20 meters thick, the architects could place different activities as hotels, shops. It depends the needs from each part of the city. In this sketch, we can see how for the architect was important the confront with the past. So for Khan, the architect, the garage wasn't a passive building inside the city, but the car parks were active building in the city, and their role was to protect the urban space inside the city from the corrosion of the space by the car. So you can see how he placed the highway and the car parks as some walls, the ancient medieval walls, to protect the inner part from the corrosion of the car. So really a civic importance for the city. Also in the next project made by Paul Rudolph in New Haven, between 59 and 61, we can see how the car parks became really a mega infrastructure. And for the architects, the inspiration, he took inspiration from the architects, the architecture of the viaducts. And we can see how the archetype of the viaducts are the Roman aqueducts. So also for Paul Rudolph, the car parks has a civil role inside the city. In these two sketches, we can see one in the left, as he imagined the car parks as a transportation hub. So also helicopter could arrive or take off. And in the ground floor, he imagined to place some other activities as restaurants, shops, or even residence. So two completely different projects with different initial models that the architect took inspiration, but in both of the case, the architect insists that the car parks have an active role inside the city. And for the last project, we remain in the US, but with a project by Herzog de Meuron, a Miami, built between 2005 and 2010. And in this project, the architects try to reimagine the generic car parks. What I mean for generic car parks. So it's a building, a blank box, made of slabs stacked one top of the others, and the distance between one and others is only 2.1 meters. So it not allowed the people to express different activity other than the car parks. Instead, in this project, the designer decided to always stack the different slab, but with a different height, to allow the people to express a completely a high variety of function. In this last image, you can see how the generic garage can change this function inside the city. It became a place where the people can go and have other activity instead of only parking the car. So this last example is really important because we can see how the architecture of obsolescence became the architecture of generosity. So to conclude, what are the hidden virtues of the garages? We can summarize in 3 points. So the first one is that the car park has an active role inside the city, and so they can embrace different activity inside. The second part is that the base for the design of the car parks are the cars, the dimension and the movement of the cars. So these demand a really generous structure that it go away from the traditional structure that, for example, could only allow residence or shop. And the last point is, you can see in this imaging, that the structure is simple, clear, and bare, allowing future function to be inserted into the building with maximum freedom. For this reason, I believe that car garage are buildings that more than others are able to interact with the passing of time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will finish the first block of 4 presentations. Okay. 1, 2, 3. I'm on the schedule. I just forgot the right order, but we can solve this. So Fabio Santonicola will, from Genova, Dipartimento di Architettura, will talk us about the relationship between large building and their context, and he will compare 2 different attitudes, a building that can be autonomous or a building that can behave as a porous device within the context. So just to let you know the order, then the 5th presentation will be by Lan Wei, the 6th by Chloé, the Druhen Charnaux, the 7th will be Maria Blagojevich, and the last one will be by Basil Bechtawi. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. No. I'm so sorry. Okay. Good morning. Good afternoon. Today I will present my research. As a professor said before, it is a research about 2 different theoretical paradigms in architecture. In fact, when we talk about station, airports, or in general transport architecture, One of the first things that comes to mind is the scale of the building. And when we speak of a large scale in contemporary architecture, it is impossible not to think of Koolhaas. In fact, I think that this notion of bigness has become a key reference for understanding how architecture confronts dimensions that overwhelm the traditional relationship with the city. In this research, I sought an alternative to Koolhaas bigness in order to explore how other architects, especially those rooted in a different culture, in a Western culture, not non-Western culture, have approached the challenge of the scale. This study compares two distinct, as I said, theoretical paradigms. The bigness of Koolhaas in contraposition with the discrete city of Hiroshi Hara, a Japanese architect of the 20th century. Going more in specifically, it is necessary to clarify what is bigness and what is discreteness for the architects. In SML-XL, Koolhaas writes that beyond a certain scale, architecture acquires the property of the bigness. And he also notes that bigness is no longer part of any urban tissue. It exists. At most, it coexists. This means that once a building reaches a certain size, it absorbs all complexity inside itself. It no longer negotiates with the city around it. Hara, instead, proposed the opposite. His discrete city, and in particular the concept of discreteness, is based on what he calls one-person cities. He defines it as a way of thinking about the city where every individual is autonomous, and yet diverse collectivities sustain activities by connecting and separating from each other. So, for Hara, we can say that the city, but also the big building, is a mosaic of differences where diversity is preserved and becomes productive. If we look at the model of in this slide, I try to compare two different projects that for me embodies the two different approaches of Koolhaas and Hiroshi Hara. In particular, on the right, you can see, no, on your left, you can see the sea terminal of Zeebrugge in an unbuilt project by Koolhaas and Studio OMA. And on the right, you can see the project of Tokyo Station, Hiroshi Hara's Tokyo Station. If we look at the model of the two projects, two aspects clearly emerge. Koolhaas' model appears as an isolated object, almost erasing its surroundings. The sea terminal can be seen as a unitary element, a huge dome that encloses multiple programs. As Koolhaas notes, bigness is no longer controlled by a single architectural gesture, nor by any one architect. In other words, the dome embodies this loss of control. Docks, circulation, and walls are all absorbed into one monumental envelope, creating the effect of a single autonomous object. Unlike Hara's approach, here complexity is swallowed into unity, instead of being expressed through multiplicity. By contrast, Hara's model is embedded in its urban fabric. It's important to see also the way to represent and to show the different projects. As I said, Koolhaas represented the sea terminal like a isolated objects. Hiroshi Hara tried to create a relationship also with the city. If Kyoto Station, in fact, is appear like fragmented, like the city in the near context. It is not a monolith, but a layered environment where transport, commerce, and culture coexist. Fragmentation makes the building permeable, turning it into a city within the city. This comes from Hara's research of vernacular villages, where communities are made of small autonomous units that coexist while keeping their individuality. Kyoto Station scales up this fragmented order to the modern metropolis. From the section drawings, it's clear that the sea terminal is conceived as autonomous, an object that functions independently from its surrounding. Koolhaas, in fact, in this essay, insists bigness no longer needs the city. It competes with the city, it represents the city, it preempts the city. Hara, instead, designs porosity. Kyoto Station opens with a large atrium, stepped terraces, bridges, and rooftop gardens. This recalls his early critique of Mies's homogeneous space or universal space in the 1960s and his porous body theory, which tried to reconcile individuality and collectivity through discontinuous but connectable units. So, Hara roots his project in the Japanese tradition of settlements, while at the same time responding to the totalizing vision of the modernism. In Koolhaas' projects, circulation is often conceived as an abstract movement, flows detached from everyday life. Also in the plan, all the passages emerge, car roads, stairways, and lift. The sea terminal channels passengers vertically from ferries to panoramic halls in a closed and controlled sequences. As Koolhaas writes in Junk Space, airports, but also we can extend this concept to transportation architecture in general, are artificially lit with no external context, only the movement of escalators and lifts bringing people together before moving them on. Hara, instead, redefines circulation as a human interaction. In Kyoto Station, the terrace becomes a place where people stop, meet, and gather. In this picture, on the left, you can see also some interesting sketches about this kind of space. Hara, in fact, tried to design with sketches and with a deep work, also all the attractor elements that he wants to insert in his project. 2 minutes. Okay, the third terminus leads towards homogeneous space, where different factions dissolve into a continuous volume. Koolhaas describes the generic city as a city without identity, without history, where individual moments are so spaced out as to create a hypnotic state of almost imperceptible experiences. In this sense, the sea terminal can be read as a built manifestation of this idea, an abstract container where distinction fade and spatial experience becomes neutral, continuous, and detached from context. Hara, by contrast, introduced the concept of attractor space, localized nodes that concentrates activity and generate encounters. He explained, I considered the entire city as a semiotic field and added attractors in specific areas to revitalize it. Kyoto Station embodies this principle as a constellation of semiotic fields within one megastructure. Instead of neutralizing differences, Hara emphasized them, transforming circulation into moments of intensity and encounters. As he further clarified, the intention was to establish heterogeneous order. The intention of the project of the Tokyo Station building was to establish heterogeneous order in which spaces of different quality exist simultaneously. Such an order in the polar opposite of a simple geometric order. It's interesting also see also in this case the different way to represent the project. The space of Koolhaas is represented only with line, without colors, while in the Hiroshi Hara's drawing there is he wanted to represent also the atmosphere of, and you can see a lot of people, while in the drawings of Koolhaas the space is totally free, and you can see also the cars in at the lower level. In conclusion, both Koolhaas' bigness and Hara's discreteness can be seen as valid responses to the challenge of scale and the space of flows in the late 20th century architecture, but also in contemporary architecture. Koolhaas absorbs complexity into unity, producing autonomous objects that stand apart from their surroundings. Hara, by contrast, preserves complexity through fragmentation and porosity, seeking continuity with context and human interaction. These two approaches, although different, are not mutually exclusive. They demonstrate how architecture, when confronted with the overwhelming scale of infrastructure and transportation, can follow multiple paths, either by enclosing and neutralizing complexity, or by opening up and multiplying it. Okay, thank you. I finish.
So I think you can stay here, so we can invite the first three presenters to sit. No, state qua. So you can sit here at this huge desk. It looks very formal, but we will try to keep it less formal than the spaces where we are, which are a bit Politecnici, let's say. So I don't have questions, of course. I hope there will be a flow of questions also between the audience and also between you. The only consideration I would like to say that we have seen 11, I think, 11, we could say somehow masterpieces. Okay, so we all know that this is not the ordinary situations; these are exceptions. So I was thinking, I was wondering whether do we hope for a world full of unique buildings, or do we need some ordinary, let's say, less interesting technical solutions in order to let some of those unique exceptions emerge out of the context? Or are we thinking of a world? Are we willing for a world where all nodes or spaces becomes potentially masterpieces? So do we also need ordinary? And at the same time, I think that somebody of you spoke about generosity. All these buildings, I think, have to deal with generosity in terms of possibility of changing in the future, or in terms of hosting functions or a way of uses that are not meant to be. But I also think that generosity has some costs, probably. So I also would like to, in the debate, I also would like to reason about this idea of generosity. And when the generosity is missing, and when we go to ordinary, is it because we are lacking? It's lack of knowledge, a lack of culture, a lack of money, lack of imagination. So what's the difference between making these unique exceptions and the most, let's say, engineering-based solutions that are not trying to look out of the minimum? Well, that's an open question to anybody, and then it's just to open.
After this last presentation, I have, I think, natural question. After the pandemic that has taught us so many lessons on how we live, how we inhabit our spaces, that in so much cases are hyper fragmented. Which way we are following in our city, the bigness or the discreteness?
I don't think it's when it's better the bigness or when you can use discreteness. It's only two different approach. Of course, I didn't say it, but of course the context in the two cases are different. No, in Japan there is a particular condition also for the project of the project of the station. In fact, the area of the competition of Tokyo Station was a destroyed area without any building. So the approach of the architect was to create to project a design, a building open to the city. Of course, Koolhaas with the bigness, but it's a modality of work. It's his process. He worked a lot with enclosed volume, and the building, because his cultural field is different, no? He studied the work, the shopping mall, and all the architecture, capital architecture of the 90s. So it's different approach, but I'm not so sure also that the problem is after and before the pandemic period. I think that pandemic period was an exception. Yes, it's exception in our life, but I don't know how your life was changed from the pandemic period to before. I don't know. Of course, it's a problem. Sorry, maybe I'm too long.
I wanted to jump in to the suggestion of Professor Lepratto, saying, so why we analyze masterpieces and how we arrive to this final solution is a lack of, you mentioned, money or creativity. I mean, dealing with infrastructure projects, it's also much more evident how the final results is shaped by a lot of regulations, by a lot of, I know, to just compromises among different priorities of different actors. We don't have just the architect perspective, we have the constraint also of the geographical context. For example, in Naples, it's rather important to keep also an eye on this. And so I agree that we should also look not only at masterpieces, but always when dealing with ordinarity or with international renewed architects projects, we should in any case remember and also try to fix also the perspective of how this is a complex result of different actors. We have this Naples, I'm thinking, but it's the one that I studied more. There is the Soprintendenza, there is the architect, there are the different engineers, the different expertise of the scientific consultant, the concessionaire, the municipality. And so I think that we are always looking with the eyes of the architect, but there is also a lot of...
I think that we need to change the approach how we build, for my example, garage. Because for generosity, I mean not always following the rule books, so not always building 2.1 meter size seating, and try to only add 50 centimeters and make the building, the floor height 2.7 meters. For me, this is generosity. Try to not designing a parking car, thinking of a car parks, but thinking of what I could insert in this type of building. So it's a different approach, a different way to start and design a building. That also this type of approach could translate in other type of building. Yeah, but I think it's a sweet spot. So you need to take in consideration money, but you also take in consideration the necessity to have a building that could be used in the future. Yeah.
During the question of generosity, I remember the project, Christian Keret's project in Bahrain. It is a parking or a beautiful Luna Park, because the two or three buildings, I don't remember the exact. Okay, the building in Bahrain by Christian Keret's burned like parking, but today it's not used like parking, but a sort of. And there are some videos that show people who run. So in this case, like public device is really generous architecture, but in terms of garage or parking, I don't know if it's general. Yeah.
But we are designing public spaces for rich people or for everyone, because the Bahrain project of Christian Keret's, I think it's a sort of manifesto. It's not just a real architecture that people can live, in which they stay. I don't know, maybe for magazine, I don't know. Because Bahrain is a complex context.
No.
Yeah, it's an open question, of course. Yeah.
Do we have some question from the audience? Or some considerations? No. Okay. No, just to continue on this line of generosity and yes, we should consider not only the economic aspect, but most cases, this is what happens. So I'm also trying to figure out whether, as also architects, we can try to influence the discourse on those structures in order to state that for the developer, for instance, the parking that in the future can become something else if we will have different needs, can become profitable. So because if we keep it on nice, okay, very good. So thank you. So do you think, but anyhow, do you think we can find a way to make this discourse more, more convincing for somebody who's addressing money into one of those sorts? But later you can answer.
I have a question regarding the Porta NOLANA terminal station. I'm sorry I didn't get your name because it was a group project, so I didn't know which. Nico. So you were talking about the surrounding of the station and that maybe there was a mismanagement of it. Do you think it was really mismanagement or maybe a matter of design, like a surrounding space that was not designed enough in order to create a sense of belonging or any sense of the city in order to maintain it? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the question, because the theme is to understand what architecture can do for a city. Because Naples is a really complex, really complex. In specific, that context, which is in the eastern part, and is populated by people who come in Naples. There are all of abusive market. How did you say? Fake market. Market of fake stuff and something else. There are so many poor people. So, what can do architecture? The theme is to understand how a building can speak on itself, and without the intention of solving all the question, but how can convincere, how to convince people to inhabit it in a right way, the public space. I don't know if it's the correct answer to your question.
I haven't been there, but for me, taking a look at it, it feels like the covering of the station is really well designed until the point where it reaches the ground, and then maybe the ground wasn't designed enough in order to match this. So it starts to, I don't know, to get lots of rubbish and not the right appropriation, but maybe because it doesn't match how good the shed is. Does it make sense?
Okay.
Okay, then we move to the second part of the session with other 4 interventions. And we move, let's say, to an issue, I think in the first at least 2 presentations, we will try to reflect also on the perceived experience between the surface, under and over, so the perceived experience in those complex structures. And I realized, I was now saying with Raffaella, that when I read all your works and I tried to, let's say, found out a line, I haven't read your names, but just the abstract. And then I realized that I made a sort of separation between the Italians and the foreigners. So on one hand, I apologize, but I didn't know that. But probably it also says something about related to topics that are under development. So I think that also says something about how in schools of architecture those issues are considered in this moment. So, but really I know that the order they have done before, it was all a mixture, try to mix nationalities and universities, and then to destroy everything. So please, Lan Wei from University College London, right? Okay, so the floor is yours.
And my project is also one of my master project called Pulsing in Transit, Reimagining Living Green's Underground Station as Urban Interface. And this project understands the station and also the mobility in a more emotion and social aspect. And the project actually began with the observation of the people on the underground. Actually, the mood is always be tired, fast-paced, efficient, but sometimes someone will smile and the stranger start a conversation between the others, like this little spark in the color of the gray. So I began to wonder, is it possible to make the in-between space less like stranger? And about the introduction, it's about the feeling of the London. London to me is like the river. It keeps moving, never still. Beneath the city lies another London. The London Underground represents a kind of known space where strangers pass but rarely meet. In cities like London, mobility is not only special but also social. In this project, the underground becomes a metaphor for emotional disconnection in modern life. The project began with the question, when the architecture of the city has shaped its underground corridors and daily flows, can invisible ties between people still be designed within this transitional space? And about the research background is nowadays the human disconnection become more and more common in the modern society. So I began to analyze how modern society constructs disconnection and concluded as three aspects. First, it's like the mobility and the logic of efficiency are continuously reinforced through the spatial organization and transportation system. And second, through the comparative study of urban way of life and traditional way of life, we can see the value changes from utility value to exchange value, and which means transaction can increasingly replace interaction. The third is the collapse of the near. As someone captures what is near, it's far. In modern society, neighbors may live in the same area, yet remain socially invisible for years, producing what Xiang Biao called a familiar strangerhood. If economic structure and urban rhythm has systematically sustained the connection, the question becomes how should we understand and respond to the figure of stranger in this context? So I first explore it through my personal experience. I take the photo of the people passing by where I live. It is on Holloway Road, and some people are residents, and some are students, and some are just travelers passing by. And also I conduct a small interview with people living there, and asking them do they feel disconnected here. Different people will have different answers. And if the goal is not to dissolve the strangerhood, but to humanize it, then the question becomes what kind of encounter can still carry meaning in an indifferent city? And so the notion of almost stranger begins here. And I think a glance, a note, a post, these are not gestures of familiarity, but of acknowledgement. Almost implies not failure, but the possibility of connection without obligation to sustain it. And the goal is to foster visibility, to see a stranger, to allow them to be seen, and to hold space for recognition. I think if modern cities are to remain livable, then the space must accommodate not only transit, but also presence. And then turn to the London Underground. I think among all urban systems, the density and repetition make London Underground one of few urban environments where strangers encounter daily. If the Underground is to be imagined as a stage for almost strangers, it is first to ask how it is actually be experienced of the daily user. So I conduct a small survey and collect some basic information and spatial perception of the people, and how the tube make you feel like in London. 80 people say it feels like kind of London iconic space, and collect some feelings. Like some people will feel it's very chaotic, but some people will feel it's very colorful. And about the personal experience question, have you ever encountered special moments, people, or staying in the tube? Some people recall the beautiful violence at South Kensington, a singing manner at King Cross, and brief conversation with strangers. It can say music and brief poses can be highlighted as important contributors to these affection moments. And among all the station layers, I turn to the design of lesson greens. It is the early 20th century station, stands out icons of London with their oxbow red facade and tiled interior. They embody the new age of underground travel. I think many people can see this red facade in London. It has like 40 stations there. Yet many, like this mapping showing here, many are being disused or abandoned nowadays. But the design of Lesson Gray leaves the roof as flat for the flat roof for the future intervention. So the second intention for this project is thinking, can this project work as a test and offer the special strategy for reimagining Lesson Green other abandoned stations in the future? And then turn to the choice of the one of the station. It's called truck farm station. This is a station nowadays still in use. And there are two main reasons for why I choose it. First is itself. Nowadays find it loses identity. It is on the border between Police Park and edgy Camden Town, but not being part of either. And second is, in contrast to international transit like King Cross, community-oriented stations hold more potential to act as the local node, where the station can intersect with the everyday life of the people. And here is a history line of the station. It is actually opened on 1907, and around its area, it is Camden, where it has many music venues, like the Roundhouse, the pub where Amy Winehouse play a lot, the Ding Hall and Coco. So the music, the cultural background for this area. And also there's a case of the Beatles, the band Beatles. They have a rooftop event. And through the video watching, I saw many passengers walking on the road, and they pause to listen where the sounds come from. And some their fans like trying to climb into the rooftop, have a view of the band. So the final intervention were divided into 4 categories, and the man will be the rooftop performance space. At the heart of the proposal is a semi-open rooftop stage. Positioned above the flows of traffic and transport, it becomes a site for small-scale concerts and community gatherings. And here are some structures. Okay, and the other 3, the second is like some small intervention. The first is the outside station. It has a signage, and here can be some brief history of the truck farm station and the map showing the surrounding music venues. And London also has the notice boards. At the back of it can leave some space for people to leave a line for the next travelers. Also, the micro-library corner can make people leave their exchange book and leave their handwriting notes. And third is the rail program on the top of the station. It is called Merry Exhibition. It inspired me that the program can also led by the community and the residents rather than just TFL. And third is the sound installation program. It's called Go On Miracles on Waterloo Station. The truck farm can also have some similar installation, play the local music. And all in all, these all small interventions can foster fleeting yet meaningful encounters. People can gather on the rooftop of the station or have a dialogue between each other through the note of the exchange book. And at last, underground for me is also like the journey of the life. At each station, some people leave and new people arrive. We travel together for the while. The almost stranger become the company of the time. And the pause is only a brief stay, never too long. After expose, we continue on towards our own destination. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, now we have the presentation of Chloé, Druhen, Charnaux. So she will highlight the tension between the design vision and the real practice of perception in use. Examples in the Grand Paris Express. PhD candidate from Montpellier and Paris, right?
There's more. Okay, it was just like the presentation, but the official one, but you can add my name if you got upset. Okay, so we're gonna start on a blank page for this presentation. Just 1 second. Yeah. You can imagine the whole presentation actually. Let me just start the timer. And so, hello everyone. Thank you very much for being here and having me. So my name is Chloé Druhen Charnaux, and I am second year PhD student at Mines Paris PSL and IMT Minales in the south of France. So today I'm going to share some insights from an ongoing research project, which is entitled From the Surface to the Underground Toward Future Interstitial Public Spaces. So this is what you should see now. So let me start this presentation with this geological cross-section of the Paris region to illustrate how the subsoil connects vast spatial and temporal scales. So this echoes with the concept of the critical zones, which is conceptualized by the philosopher Bruno Latour that you can see in the Book of Abstract. And the critical zone is the thin layer of Earth, which is altered by human activities through ages. And viewed through the lenses of this concept, the underground emerges not as a void or a passive substrate, but as a thick inhabited layer, a hybrid zone where geological matter, human activity, and technological system converge. So this perspective challenges the dominant horizontality of urban thoughts and prompts us to reimagine the city as a vertical assemblage. Depth would matter as much as a surface, and that would raise questions of access, control, maintenance, and visibility of these places. So today I'm focusing on the underground mobility infrastructure of the Grand Paris Express, which has been presented before, so I'm going to go quick. This is a project that was launched in 2015, and it's still underway in the Parisian region. And it consists of 4 new fully automated metro lines and 2 extensions of already existing lines, adding 68 new stations to the network. And the vast majority of the stations are built underground and are built by and designed by international architects. So my case study centers on 3 key stations along line 14, which is the first line to open to public. So we have Santonicola in the north, we have Maison Blanche in the south, and in the south too, Villeville-Gustave Roussy. So there's been a minor adjustment to the selection that was in the abstract, but it is only due to site accessibility. It doesn't change the whole approach. So these stations are not simply technical nodes in a network. They are designed as symbolic places carrying a narrative about the city of tomorrow, of the future. In official documents, they are thought as more than just places of transit, but real living and public spaces open to the city. So my work draws on two sources: the architect's rendering that you can see on the screen, which depicts an idealized future. You can see a calm, fluid, inclusive metropolis where underground infrastructure would serve the surface as a connecting way, places. And my own site-based sketches and photos assembled into sensitive maps that I will present you. So this dual lens helps me explore a central question: how do we access to the critical zone, so this layer of urban areas, and what visions of the underground do architects convey? So on all the following slides, the images on the left are the architect's renderings, and those on the right are mine. So you can compare the two of them. So the first stop of our journey is the Santonicola station. It is envisioned as a major hub of the Grand Paris Express and was actually a key site of the Olympic 2024 in Paris. It is integrated into a still developing neighborhood, so it's a very strange space. The designs that you can see emphasize openness and flow, using wood, glass, and light to create a welcoming underground space. In the renderings, everything supports the movement. Users are in transit, and each element guides bodies through space. But my photo reveals a more complex reality. We have spaces of pause, of rest, and temporary vacancy. So this in-between zones act as thresholds, challenging the idea of the pure fluidity of space and highlighting like the layered and evolving nature of the station. So the first sensitive map of the descent I want to share with you is this one. I've paired it with a longitudinal section of the station to offer an alternative way of representing depth, focused more on the users for the experience of underground infrastructure and architecture. So this maps highlights aspects that are absent from the architect's rendering, actually. The first one is the importance of the other senses than visions. In the station, I was marked by the strong sense of pine due to the wood that is used in the station. I also noticed the coolness of the lower levels caused by the air circulation in the structure. The second one is that the bright and the bright open upper levels that you saw on the pictures sharply contrast with the darker, more intimate lower floors that create a strong cocoon-like feeling enveloping the bodies during the descent. So our second stop is Maison Blanche, and this station is one of the few located within Paris, actually. It is surrounded by heavy residential and surface level traffic. So the architect's rendering that you see on the screen depicts a minimal above-ground structure with the emphasis placed on the metro entrance and the descent underground. In this way, it closely resembles to historic Parisian metro station with a shallow opening into which one gradually descends. So the interior is fluidly designed around a central hall that distributes movement between the two lines, 14 and 7, that are in the station. And my photo reflects this particular downward journey, emphasizing the materiality of the underground, as you can see up there. We have some walls that are left raw, which evoke the natural environment behind the infrastructure, so what's left invisible actually by the construction. We can also notice the limited lighting and low ceiling that creates a concentrated and almost claustrophobic atmosphere. The sensitive map that emerged from this distance suggests a labyrinthine experience with a sequence of different corridors guiding the users from the surface to the platform. So you may have noticed that in the map, the surface level occupies much of the space, and it is due to the strong impression it left me. we got this very busy shared space for cars, bike, and pedestrians, and we can feel the metro under our feet when we are on the surface. So it really is a place where fast metropolitan flows of the metro will intersect with the slow and constrained rhythm of everyday life. And our final stop is Villejuif-Gustave-Roussy, which is located next to the hospital of the same name in an area that is still in transition. It is surrounded by surface car park and a public park that is still under construction. So you can see on the picture on the right. And unlike what the architectural rendering suggests, the station presence at street level is almost non-existent. Actually, all the attention goes below the ground on this monumental infrastructural core, which is a 50-meter deep vertical shaft shaped by a composition of sweeping curves and sharp angles. It's a rigid and almost choreographed rhythm of movement. So the experience is one of spatial disorientation, and this is a feeling that was actually shared by several users I spoke with during my time in the station. So the experience is one of this. I'll go faster. Anyway, but what struck me the most, and what you can see on the map, is also the mechanical nature of the descents, and like the buzzing sound of the escalators really shaped the descent. It was really impressive when I was in the station, and it feels like the body is no longer in control. The movement is dedicated by the infrastructure itself, actually. So to conclude, I wanted to sum up in this diagram that would help us to understand that the city is a stratified system. It's stretching from the speculative vision at the surface to the deep materiality of buried infrastructures. It reveals the tension between imagined futures, everyday practices, and technical systems, showing that the urban surface is not a natural space, but a constantly negotiating threshold. And by adopting this whole critical zone point of view from Bruno Latour, we move beyond the usual binary between what's ideal and what's real, what's future and what's present, and everything gathered together. So instead of doing this, we begin to read transport station as hybrid, multi-layered environments where engineering systems, embodied experience, and symbolic meaning all come together. And finally, I also wanted to add that by contrasting architectural renderings with sensitive mapping, this research tried to challenge fixed and abstract representation of urban space. It calls for a more situated and responsive way of representing a city and actually its subsoil as a space in constant transformation and transition and movement. So thank you very much for your attention. And looking forward for questions. Thank you.
Okay, as you see, apparently the presentation are not always visible from home. So we try to continue and then we see if it works or not. So with Maria Blagojevic from Belgrade, we stay, I think, in the track of experience, right? In the how is the quality of the experience in some underground structures, modernist passages in Belgrade.
Hi. Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about non-places. I believe most of you are familiar with the term from Marc Roger. It's quite popular, but I think it's very interesting how through that concept we can view urban places today. It's very linked to transitional spaces and spaces of mobility. So in that context, it is very interesting to see how we can interpret it through that. So this presentation explores the questions of how the concept of non-place helps us understand today's issues regarding modernist pedestrian infrastructure in the post-socialist context of Belgrade. The typology of the underground passages reflects the shifting identity of the city from modernist ambition and socialist ideology to post-socialist dismantlement and neoliberal policies. In architectural discourse, it is kind of this question of identity, what actually makes the identity of space. So the common denominator in all these theories is usually that identity is something that is actually perceived when we are in certain spaces, that there is no such thing as making an identity out of just only one aspect of a place, for example, geography or typology or something like that. So it's more of a perceptive. It's more about perception whilst in the space. So yeah, so this it's interesting how all the concepts of non-places they talk about how through losing of identity, it creates a new sense of place whilst we're in it. So this is actually making a connection of how public space through fast-paced mobility, traffic, and infrastructure shifts towards more transitional space, and then how transitional space moves to non-space through underfunding, free market privatization, and other issues that actually transform it. So I actually put non-place, liminal space, and junk space because I feel like all the three encompass this quite interesting phenomena in which the place is in a certain spot of perception that is not quite, it's not really, it doesn't interact with the user. It's more of a space that leaves this hollow feeling of ambiguity whilst we're in it. So, how I interpret this sentiment is that places that are streamlined and transitional don't really allow the user to dwell. Thus, leaving little chances for forming relationship between the user and the space, and making the space feel unpleasant for long-term use. So in this, I was using Edward Ralph's placelessness as an example. It's kind of a predecessor to the non-place, as it kind of shares this feeling of it's opposing to modernity in a sense that it's criticizing its functionality and its form as something that is depriving space of its identity. Then 20 years later, Marc Roger coins the non-place as these spaces of transit, which are also kind of specific to this modernity. And they are more specific in the sense that it's a transit place and it's pinpointed to airports, to passages, through hallways. It's a place that is specific, but yet very ambiguous when somebody's perceiving it. So then we have the liminal space, which is vacant, evoking an eerie feeling, discomfort. But it's a place. I think liminal space is actually a kind of a modern way to define the concept of non-place, because the problem actually evolves through time. So the problem of non-place actually evolved to the problem of liminal space, in which it's now kind of a fictional moment in which liminal space is a theme throughout. It's kind of through pop culture become a theme of this horror genre that actually depicts spaces that are eerie, that are very eerie and very uncomfortable to be in. So actually, it kind of connects to Edward Rolfe's saying that spaces get their identity from the function of their dwelling. So when you can kind of spend more time in a place, you create that sense of identity with it. But as the place becomes more transitional and it's just a streamlined movement for the place, you get little feeling of its identity and it becomes uncomfortable. And the uncomfortability kind of makes the cycle of it becoming more and more deprived of its identity. And then again, another evolution of the term is the junk space by Koolhaas, which is basically how space is being under the pressures of consumerism, under the pressures of hyperproduction space, under the pressures of hypermobility of people now. It's again losing identity, and it's becoming this sense of it's being kind of a consumerist thing, where it's not really about the space anymore. It's more about the consumption of its space and how the interaction of space, the interaction of a person with its space is not that important. It's more of just how the space economically works. So it's not about the quality of the space. It's more about the economics that surround the space. So now, the certain space I'm going to test this theory on is the underground passages of Belgrade. The modernist identity of the city. Belgrade was built. Belgrade after the war was very demolished. So we had this massive project of New Belgrade, which is on the other side of the river. It has a lot of block housing. It's a whole city built on modernist ideas, on modernist infrastructure and modernist perceptions of place. And it's a city in a whole embodying this ideal of how a perfect city in the eye of modernist social Yugoslav architects should function. And so in this context, there was a lot of emphasis, it was put on mobility. So mobility of cars, mobility of traffic, mobility of people. So a lot of infrastructural projects at this time were made. And it's interesting how on the picture on the right, you can see this. This is a square, which was usually a pedestrian square. Now it's filled with cars, because cars at this point were a sense of luxury. They weren't, because global warming wasn't yet that big of an issue in people's minds. This was like a picture of wealth. Like they had so many cars in this particular space, and that was kind of how the city became a little bit too car-centric at this time. So then we needed more pedestrian infrastructure, and by this time there was a lot of infrastructure built in terms of underground passages that would connect these places that were now disrupted to, by the mobility of cars and infrastructure. So here is a map of Terazije Square, which used to actually be a pedestrian street with tram lines. Now, after modernization, it became a street with, I think it has 7 lanes of car traffic. And it has now 6 different passages that connect throughout it, because there's actually no way to pass from one place in the city to the other without going under and experiencing these underground passages. So this is actually, so in the Yugoslav context, modernization of Belgrade carried also a geopolitical weight, as it was both the capital of the city and the representative of the non-aligned movement. So it was very important to keep it as this representation of how modernism should look like, in the sense of it not being too much influence from the East, or not much influenced by the West. So it actually here it's we can see how these passages were created to show how the modernist idea actually functioned and how these passages were a solution in modernity. And so there's like these passages actually were supposed to be connected to the metro that was supposed to be built, and it wasn't. And now they kind of stand as this idea of what all could have happened here, but it didn't happen because there was, again, a geopolitical change in regime, change in infrastructure, and now they are kind of vacant, but yet still they are a necessity for mobility through the city, because there still wasn't a change that surpassed their position in the urban environment. So this is kind of how they look like now. They're very vacant. There's a degradation of their interior. Usually the shops that are there, they close quite often. There's some usually some stocking shops or something like that. From this idea that this is going to be a space in which the modernist idea is going to show functionality, it became very dysfunctional. And it's now, even though it's useful in the city, it still doesn't function in a way that it was meant to, and it still makes us feel very unsafe. Very, it's not a pleasant, it's not a pleasant urban interior to be in. So there's now this question of what do we do with this space now that the time has run its course. It's not functional in the sense that it needed to be, but yet we needed to go from one place in the city to the next. So yeah, so it's kind of now, I think it also can represent the complexity of job space, as it the market has kind of devoured its purpose because it's no longer commercially sustainable in the city. So now we have to think of some other option that can happen for us to kind of make the space more sustainable in a sense. So now's the question of what can be done to it. So if we think of revitalization, it requires a lot of investment. The state doesn't really show care for it because the centralized government is not enough, doesn't have enough regards towards it. So now it's a kind of a question of what in this, can it even be now, can it even be used now as commercial space? Because the function of its mobility is so prevalent now that I think that even the shops now are completely, they cannot be used anymore. It's just a transit zone. So now it's just how do we transform this non-place back to a meaningful place, and how do we re-engage the city back to using it? And so it's also a question of is it, if we say that these spaces are not useful anymore, is that kind of an erasure of the modernist ideas that were implemented in it? And is it from a perspective of a conservatory background, is it okay to erase the spaces, or should the spaces become something else, and can we revive them? So that's kind of the end question of the, because I don't have the answer. This is an open question.
So thank you, and we go to the last presentation that will be online, hopefully. Okay, so please, Basil, can you switch on?
Maybe I can share my screen. It's easier, Mike.
So then we'll. Okay, we have seen you for a couple of seconds. Try to share the screen, please. Messages. Okay. Can you try to? Okay, now we see you. That's already.
Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
You're improving. Now we see your screen.
Okay.
So don't do anything. Okay. Okay, we see the presentation. So we go to the last presentation. I kept Basil as the final presentation because we do, I think, quite a big shift. We moved more. We went to a more architectonical perspective to the experience, and now we move to a more political dimensions with a very, say, also heavy question. Does mobility bring freedom or redefine control?
Okay.
I think this is very much connected with the idea of connection, disconnection. So I think it's a good question to conclude. So I leave you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. My name is Basil, and I'm a PhD student, second year PhD student at the IA, the Architecture Association School of Architecture. Unfortunately, like today, I'm presenting through online because I wasn't able to secure an appointment for the visa. Everyone wanted to go to Italy in the summer. So sorry guys if I'm socializing just through the screen. So this is the only possible way. I apologize for this. So maybe my presentation would be the final one, as I see the presentation is going from an architecture perspective to the user experience of those architecture. But my presentation today is asking when we are going to be in a political positions where it's very contested, how this would affect the user experience, the mobile subject, and also how this will affect also the design of the passage architecture itself. So I want to start by a very important time in 1994 where the Palestinians has signed the Oslo Accords with Israel. And so because of those accords, Palestinians have to control the West Bank and Gaza over transition plan of 5 years. The accords were designed in a transition way where the Palestinians would get their full sovereignty over the territories, over a transition plan of 5 years, over all the other sectors, including the infrastructure, the economy, the socials and politics, and even the governmental one. So the spiritual part of this accords were about distributing the West Bank into 3 main areas: Area A, Area B, and Area C. As you see here, Area A is the area that the Palestinians would immediately control. Area B, where the areas where the Palestinians and Israelis will control together, and Area C are the areas where the Israelis will control. Over 5 years, all of those areas will come to be under the Palestinian full sovereignty. But unfortunately, after 5 years, the Oslo Accords had collapsed, which means like the Palestinian Authority had decided if they still want to keep ruling the West Bank under those transition suspended sovereignty or not. The Palestinian Authority had decided to stay and to rule the West Bank and Gaza within those were transition suspended sovereignty, especially on the spatial perspective. The Palestinian Authority in 2000 had decided to build under a project of building the state a transportation hub buildings across all the West Bank cities to connect all the West Bank cities. However, the territorials are under a suspended sovereignty. They have like announced an award, and there are a company called Preco that has awarded that type of projects because the company has provided special kinds of very advanced architectural drawings and architectural designs for the transportation hubs. It usually aligns with the Western Union because the Western Union was the one who donated for the projects. The projects were designed in the concept of the modern space or the free span constructed typology with no walls inside the transportation. This is like the traditional parking lots, but it is used as a way to be the transportation hub. However, at the same time, we see that the settlement's still there, and there are other type of typology that also uses the same kind of the modern space, which is the checkpoint typologies. The checkpoint terminals are also used the same way of the suspended fully canopy spans with pillars and with no walls and with a small kinds of rooms for security and for bureaucracies and for other types of things. As we see, like we have like two important main typologies that works within the modernist free space kinds of logic, but both of them is working in an architecture and also in an infrastructure perspective, and both of them are opposite in the meaning to each other. Now, in order to understand this, we see like this is the spatial map of what is the result. You can see like the orange rectangles are all the checkpoints, and the different colors of the green are the places where area A, area B, and area C. So the transportation hubs and the checkpoints becomes two modern spaces, two free spaces that they are working together in a suspended sovereignty and in a different meaning. What I wanted to say before, to understand how those free spaces are working, if they are working in an architecture or infrastructure, or how is the relationship between them, we should know the difference between the modernist or the modernism free space and the critique of modernism free space. I'm using specifically the triangle, which is I call it like the golden triangle and the architecture theory, which is the relationship between form, function, and subject. And what is the main important difference between the modernism free space and the critique of modernism free space is how both of them is articulating the relation between form, function, and subject. For modernism free space, the form, function, and subject is introduced through firstly by free plans of Le Corbusier, where Le Corbusier understands the subjectivity as a very technical and subject, who the architecture could like organize it through the free pillars and through the free facades. Actually, this was for the residential subject, but if you read The Radiant City for Le Corbusier, you would see like he applied those kind of free plan principles even for the transportation hub in his city. However, we see also the universal space for Mies van der Rohe, where Mies van der Rohe thinks that the kind of subjectivity that the universal architecture could create or organize, it's not just a technical one, but it could be also social liberal one, a liberal one. Here we see form can organize the subject-function relationships. The critique of modernism free space, which also about the relationship between form, function, and subject, is two things. But the main thing is, or the most popular one, is the Tumi idea of the grid. The grid is under concept of an undecidability. The undecidability here where Tschumi critiques the relationship between form, function, and subject that the modernism had provided, and say that the free logic or the free kind of free space is no longer have any relation between both of the three. The relations are undecidable. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the relationship becomes like the events and the programs are the main mediator of the space, and we no longer have a certain relationship. We have the critique are always through two different perspectives. The first is form, function, and subject exist in a systematic disjunction. And the other one is the Koolhaas one, as we said and as we saw in one of the presentation, like program and infrastructure could override the form function subject relationship when the building comes to a specific kind of infrastructure. From a post-colonial perspective, T.T. Cruz has come to use the same kinds of the free space, the grid, but he argues like the subject can now organize the form-function relationship. T.T. Cruz and postcolonialism thinks that the subject is not a passive one in that equation, and it could recolonize those spaces to make it hybrid, and in that way it could liberate. So now, if we ask ourselves about the modernist space or the modernist logic that have been used in both of the Palestinian transportation hubs and also the checkpoints, are they architectural logic, which means the free plan enables subject to experience space through formal symbolic relationships? Or are they a critique of modernism logic, where the free plan enables subject to navigate space through operational flows as pure functions or completely undecidable, like Tschumi? Or are they also post-colonial logic, which means that even whatever the relationship is, are mastering it through the technical knowledge, through infrastructure or architecture one, would make the subject liberated? So, as I'm entering my second year, I'm starting to analyze those typologies and see the relationship between them and ask myself those three questions to see if those types of typologies are practicing the mobile subject through one of them, all of them, or none of them. But the initial findings, which is very interesting, is like, actually, if we have like a free plan, and we have a free plan in the checkpoint, and we have also a free plan in the transportation hub, if we have a parking lot that is in city B inside the transportation hub of the Palestinian city, the taxi driver should understand this as an architecture, because it has meaning and this typology of free plans give them a Palestinian sovereignty through this kind of architecture and only through the parks. But in the same moment, they should understand that this is a suspended sovereignty because they would go past through the checkpoint, which means that they should understand this as there are no relation between the form function and event, form function and subject, and they see it as a very standard bureaucratic standardization, so they can like go through the checkpoint as a security. And they go back to the city and do it the same. In the checkpoint, it's the same. The soldier thinks and this free plan as an Israeli sovereignty over the free space, but in the same time, in order to because they are not interested to rule Palestinians fully, they want to give the PA, like, it's not my responsibility, but I can still stop you and occupy you. So they want to also, at the same time, think of those mobile subjects as a very standard bureaucratic or infrastructure where there are no relation between the form, function, and subject. So here we see like we have Tschumi, but we have also modernism, but they are not in a dialectical way. The important thing is, like, as I said, the Route 3, for example, is seen as a Palestinian-Israeli symbolic of territorial space, which is architecture, but also seen as an infrastructure, which is neutral transit flow to destination for both of the Palestinians and Israelis, could still process that system of suspended sovereignty. So the mobile subject must see both stimulously, but deny one for the other. The checkpoint is at the same way and at the same. So what I'm trying to introduce now is that maybe there are a problem of how we think about the relationship fundamentally from a dialectical way. The dominant architectural theory still sees that the relationship between form, function, and subject could be understood dialectically. And even if it's architecture or infrastructure, even this is dialectically, which means if it's not architecture, it's infrastructure. If not infrastructure, it could be architecture. Post-colonialism thinks that it could be hybrid. But what we see here is that it's not hybrid, and it could not be one, because if it will be one, it will deny the other, so the system would collapse. I'm introducing something called an impossibility, which is inherited from Derrida, a French Algerian philosopher, where he thinks like there are sometimes two important oppositions or contradictions that could work together through impossible relationship, and they could just only form because there are an impossible relationship between them. So this is like my initial findings, and I hope like in future I would like go and see more about those relationship of how we can understand the free space if we apply it in architecture design and a transportation hub and its relationship to the territorial scale. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Basil, very much. So maybe as you are the last presenting, there you can stay with the camera on like now, so we can see you. And I invite also the other three presenters to go to the main show. So in this second part, we have moved a bit the focus from the building itself to the experience of being in a place. Somebody said it's not about space anymore. It's about, maybe it's about quality of space. It's about economy. It's about how space works. It's also about how, which is the experience that we have in a place that can maybe be different from the one in the vision of the architect that was maybe in the French cases, but above all, I would say in the case in Belgrade. So the ideas, the envisioning that we had, that the architects had, the architect of the first group had, then maybe become something different. So I'm also wondering, can we predict, while we as architects design a place like that, are we able to make and which are the instruments maybe to be able to predict how these spaces will be used in the future? Because most of the functions are functions that happens while we do something else. So we do a station, but in the station something else will happen. Some new function that are maybe not always planned will occur, and I don't know. Which is according to your opinion, the level of capability that we have to predict how a space will be used, and to be able to make a space that will be used in a positive way in the time, evolving in the time. So that's just the first question to break the ice, but then you can also, well, I don't know, answer, skip it, ask other questions from the audience or between you.
I don't know if architecture could actually predict the future, so that's kind of a question. Is it better to actually make something that's functional at the moment and then just kind of maybe somehow leave it to be readapted? I don't know, because I feel like if it's looking too much, this is again on the experience of Belgrade, if it's looking too much towards the future and it's promised a longevity that's not going to be, achieved, maybe that's kind of maybe there's a problem if it's looking too much in something that could have happened but maybe doesn't happen. So maybe it should not look that much about how it can be transformed, but rather how can it be transformed, but not how it is going to transform something. Because I don't know if sometimes architecture maybe kind of takes itself too important and thinks it's more important than actually the context that is transforming itself. But then, does anybody else have
I found like different city has different strategy to the station, and like in China nowadays more and more stations are connected to the community center. It's like station is underground, and when you come to the ground level, there are some like cafe and shopping center. But like when I go to some other cities in Europe, like in Spain, some places don't have station. They just like a stair and just go to the ground floor. I think maybe it depends on different strategy of the urban planning, and maybe in the future some city like they don't want to have like big infrastructure. They will like not use the station as a function, and some city want to connect it more with the community. They will future build some like community center. Yeah.
Thank you. And just to complete what has been said, because I completely agree, I just wanted to add the importance of big philosophical shifts, considering like the future. We really need, I'm not an architect, actually I'm a philosopher, so this is kind of my thing, but like I think architecture should really open to other disciplines, such as philosophy, and I will just quote what we just heard before by Gilles de Lalex during the opening session, that the future is no longer something we can think about as something distant, but we have an avenir, what we call in French, avenir, what's to come, that is already existing in the present. And this is actually Gilles de Lalex quoting Bruno Latour once again, who made a conference in 2013 about like future is dead, what's to come, and you can find it on YouTube if you want to think about this. So I think this is one major point to open to other disciplines, to understand better what's in the present, to build from something. You never build from nowhere. There is always something existing. And the other thing about like tools that we can use as architects to build a future is maybe like having a reflection around numerical tools that is widely used in architecture nowadays. Like we use laptops, we use special design infrastructure, I don't know how to say it, like software, yeah, exactly. And maybe having a reflection about what's designing by this, how can this be changed in the future, and how does this can intercept like this all non-physical and imaginary vision of the future. So yeah, I think this is connected, like all this. Maybe if you want to answer, Basil.
Yeah, maybe like this is also at the core of what we mean by like if we could like design an universal space like the Mies van der Rohe one, a space where like any subject can come and can do whatever they want. And in that space, like if we could reach to a level where the architecture design could be very utopian to that level. But even like in the universal space of the Mies van der Rohe, he ended up like creating a very specific social liberal kind of subjectivity. So I'm not against the utopian way of architecture design, and I think that this is like very important, and we should start from there. We should know exactly what we are designing for, who we are designing for, and why we are designing. But we also know that this will be very constrained with the kinds of the different powers relationships, because architecture is like a kind of power relations. We couldn't ignore this. But we couldn't also control this as an architecture because the agency of architecture is a little bit constrained in that way. So if we believe that our agency as an architect is a little bit not so powerful, we could like say, oh, we can design in that way, but we will wait to see how those architecture goes to.
Do we have some questions, some comments?
Thanks for all the great presentations. I think something that stayed with me from even the first half was maybe that quote of the CISA principle on Sofia's slide that architects they don't invent anything, they recompose the existing. And I think that was presented in the first half. I think it was very positive that in doing less, maybe then we have this space for generosity and openness and porosity, and these are all things with positive values for architecture. And I would just also really curious to hear your thoughts on if you agree with that as like going forward as architecture as a projective practice, if doing less is maybe a good technique, or maybe if there's also, I guess, other critiques of that idea.
If I understood the question right, I think it's very nice to look at it at a positive, and I think also yes, sometimes the thing you said about reconstructing about what we already have, and it's just kind of making it. I think that is a very good way of viewing, because if again I always repeat to myself, if we are trying to make something that I think is too much of a statement, sometimes it's not actually something that is needed, or it's not something that is. I think sometimes the projects that are kind of statement projects can be good, but then again, sometimes if it's something that over time, maybe in one scenario, it's a good, like a big monumental project, but then as time goes on and society changes, sometimes it's not, and it's kind of more harder to reimagine it if it's not sensible to, and if it's not kind of taking from pieces of the place that it's in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so since I'm not an architect and I didn't do architecture studies, I don't exactly know how it is. But what I would say is that this is a question of scenarios, and that's what you just explained, and I completely agree with it. And especially a question of narratives. What narrative do you give to what you build, and what change do you introduce in this narrative? Like, how do you build this narrative? How do you write it? How do you represent it? And are you aware of this? So I think this is all a question of scenarios, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, okay. No big statement. Otherwise, we may do something that doesn't work. But there have to be some rules, some. I'm not saying a recipe, but something that we know that improve the experience. That maybe from your style. So, for instance, Lang. She was saying in China they are building up some community centers at the very surface of the stations, if I want to understand. So this is already, then it can have different shapes in architecture. But at the same time, you are saying if we manage to combine or to reduce to a minimum the infrastructure, just on the stair, and then it's the city that does all the rest, like in the Rambla in Barcelona, where you have just nothing, but the city itself works. Or you can, when it gets some dimension, go into try to have some other function that can make a place alive during the day, during the night. So I think that this is under control. This can be partially under control. not completely, because we don't know if that shops will work, and if I don't know. But we know that if we do a corridor of 100 meters, no light, no nothing, or even if you do some shops underneath, that probably will not work easily. We have here also in Milan many shops in metro line. So I also think that there are some real, let's say, realistic goals that we can try to redefine while we judge an experience. I don't know if you agree or not. So in these terms, I think we have to find a way to, not to predict the future like a magician, but to at least understand when we do something, when we take a decision, a spatial decision, which can be the percentage of failure or of success. Otherwise, it's like a blind job and we don't know where to go. So I don't know if you agree or not. And then I have one specific question. You were talking about disconnection and connection, and so in places that are connected, and we feel disconnected in places that are meant for connection somehow on different scales. So do you think that this idea of disconnection is something wrong? Is something good? Is something that we have to fight again, or we have to I mean, I don't know. Can you say something more about this concept of disconnection? No.
I will not say it's wrong or right, but I think in the social level, the disconnection can make the society more work, like the efficient, like the underground, if just don't work, then it use bus and taxi and walking, and the whole city will not that efficient. So the disconnection can actually make the society more workable. But for from the personal level, maybe people will have some emotional feel like they're strangers in the whole society. So finding the way to bridge the disconnection is not to fight with how society works. It's try to find some small interventions, like some gathering space can make people feel more belonging to the society.
There are some moments in the daily life that you be not part outside. So sometimes it's the most huge experiences. Feeling disconnected, feeling that you are just one. About Kirsten, of course, in some moments, so it wasn't. We have another question.
I have two questions. One of them is for Chloé. It's about how do the stations look on the ground level, because we have talked a lot about this project Grand Paris in Brazil for a long time now. Not only after it was being built, but before, when they did the competition, and I think 10 offices worked on it. So after, because it really looks good on the diagram, and it's a vision that's accurate for what a transportation network should look like for a city as big as Paris, or for other cities bigger than Paris as well. And looking at the stations, it reminds me a lot of the newer stations in São Paulo that have been built during the 2010s, 2020s, that also have these shafts, these glass-covered skylights. But I don't know why, but the architects, they didn't seize the chance to make it look like a good public space on the ground floor. They're maybe more pleasant to be inside compared to the other stations that look more dark, don't have as much skylights, but on the ground floor you have like this glass covered skylight with a fence around it sometimes, or with a lawn that is not accessible to pedestrians. So if you could give me a hint of how it looks like. And I have another question also to Maria. So there's no subway in Belgrade, not at all? So they want to build on this existing infrastructure?
You need to speak.
Oh, okay.
So you can go closer.
Yeah, okay. No, so I was wondering if you know about the projects, because I mean, I'm really interested in socialist realism. And I noticed that sometimes in post-socialist countries, or like maybe even China, which is still a socialist country but has a market economy nowadays, it feels like there's a bigger preoccupation with how the stations are going to look like after all, compare at least to Latin America or North America. The subway looks awful, and even here sometimes, but still okay. So, like, are the projects, do they reflect this kind of preoccupation that was existing in socialist realism, or is it still run down, like the process you were talking about of neoliberalism and the transformation of those spaces into junk spaces, which I've seen in Brazil, for instance, in new subway projects that do not use really good materials or don't have a good plan sometimes.
Yeah, so we have a new project for the metro, and it kind of isn't evolving from the old ones and from the old infrastructure. So now we have this problem of, we have this old modernist infrastructure that is being abandoned, and there is new infrastructure that's going to be built, but it's not going to connect, it's not going to fix the already existing problem. It's just going to create new spaces. So now it looks like we're kind of repeating the mistakes from the West, as opposed to kind of learning as we have something that already happened and is going to happen here again. So now it's kind of just, how do we use the as you said, in Brazil and North America, it already looks run down, and yet we're aiming towards creating those spaces again and seeing the process all over again happen. And so, yeah, it's kind of, how do we, because Serbia is not now a socialist country, so it's kind of this idea how, because in the public image, it's quite debatable who likes the socialist image and who doesn't like the socialist image. And then it's kind of a controversy if you do relate to the old infrastructure, but it's also a problem if you don't, because it kind of leaves it just to wither away however it is. So yeah, I don't know if we have the answer to it. Maybe China has a better answer, but we're kind of in this in-between space where we are leaving the socialist and the modernist architecture behind, and we're kind of trying to keep up with the West, but we're kind of making the same mistakes that have been made. That's kind of. I always feel like I always say something negative. It's so bad. But I don't know. I know. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much to everybody. We declare closed the session.
Bye.
Bye, Basil.
Just two information for you. One is that we are planning to do a sort of drink, social drink together, but I don't know where. So maybe we can come back to the Leonardo, to the other room. And the second is that tomorrow morning there will be another keynote lecture. So it would be at 9, and we planned the coffee at 8:30. But we understand. Please, just for the presentation, try to be on time. Take your coffee and come inside. Okay. Thank you. Thank you really for your presentation. The discussion were really interesting and nice. Thank you.